Hey everybody! Today I am reviewing Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi. This is a sci-fi book, and as we all know, sci-fi is not exactly my greatest genre. So I did pick up this book because I am trying to read new things, and I am trying especially to read more sci-fi. I don't know why, but it's just a genre that I've always had trouble with. I talked a little more about this on my review for The Crystal Bridge, in which I basically just kind of critiqued the sci-fi genre as a whole, plus the really, really great book, The Crystal Bridge by Charlie Pulsifer. So, I mean, twofold. It's a great video to check out. I was just browsing audiobook titles, and this one happened to catch my eye, and it's narrated by Will Wheaton, so it was kind of like a win-win. Why not? I'll give it a try. I've got nothing to listen to right now. For some reason, I still have this irrational idea in my head that sci-fi is boring, and it goes over my head. And I'm still actively, or not so actively, trying to convince myself that this is not true, and so I am really glad that this is the book that I happened to pick up. This was probably the perfect book to do that. I have a hard time grasping this fear I have of sci-fi. When I tried to read science fiction when I was younger, I could never get into it. It always felt very confusing and cold and distant and, well, for lack of a better word, alien. It wasn't like any of the other books that I ever read. It didn't seem to involve me as much emotionally or with the characters, and I had a hard time understanding it or really getting into it. Fuzzy Nation, by comparison, is vibrant. It is colorful and full of life, and above all, utterly human. It's about a major corporation that is exploiting the minerals from an uninhabited planet, and what happens when someone may have possibly discovered a sentient species existing on the planet. It's almost like Scalzi took the traditional sci-fi and infused it with a dose of stark reality, including greed and lawyers and ethics and environmentalists. I got so wrapped up in the story and the plot and just the full emotions behind it that it didn't feel totally like a sci-fi novel to me, or at least what I remember sci-fi being, and so I really, really enjoyed that. My favorite part of this story was the main character, Jack Holloway. I am all about interesting and imperfect characters, and Jack Holloway was the cream of the crop. He's kind of a jerkwad, but he's an amusing jerkwad. It was incredibly compelling because I had a hard time figuring him out. The more I learned about him, the more I doubted that he was actually going to be the hero in this story. The whole time I spent listening to this, I was wondering what he was up to and what he was gonna do, and whether or not he would wind up looking out for himself and his own interests. Because you come to realize that he really isn't a quote-unquote good guy. But you still wonder whether he could become one. It kept me guessing. Is he inherently a good guy, or is he inherently self-interested? Also, he was hilarious and sarcastic and cheeky, and I just love that in a character. I liked that though this was a sci-fi novel, it didn't really feel like a sci-fi novel. The story and the situation were written with such ease that it felt so natural and realistic. It's odd, but I loved how much this supposedly sci-fi book actually turned into a courtroom drama. I wasn't expecting that, and I have a feeling it's what added to the sense of realism for me. We have lawyers and intense legality issues today, so obviously we're going to have them in the future about futuristic things. Now, as a caution, just because this is something that I point out in the books that I read, there is quite a bit of swearing in this book. I'm surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did because of the amount of swearing. And I have been trying to figure that out, and I think it's because the swearing was not just used for the sake of swearing. It felt very emotional and very with the characters and with the situations. And it played into them. It wasn't just explicit swearing. It also helped that the F word wasn't used even once. So while there was a lot of swearing, I didn't feel that it was used explicitly, and I think that's one of the reasons why I still enjoyed this book so much. Overall, the story is excellent. It's interesting and compelling and thought-provoking. As a warning, this is a reboot of an older sci-fi novel called Little Fuzzies. A lot of people who read the original have not liked this reboot because there are stark differences, including pretty much everything about the character Jack Holloway is different. So if you've read the original, there's a good chance that you won't like this one. I really enjoy it, and a lot of people who have only read this one have really enjoyed it. Because I did listen to the audiobook, I have to point out that this was a masterful performance by Wil Wheaton. I didn't really expect any less, but I was kind of worried that I would get distracted by the fact that Wil Wheaton was narrating it. But a couple of discs in, I actually forgot that Wil Wheaton was narrating it because his performance just became the story to me. He wasn't Wil Wheaton, he was Jack Holloway and Wheaton Aubrey and all of the other characters in this story. And that is what makes a great narration. Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi, another sci-fi book that I can actually add to the list of sci-fi books that I really, really enjoyed, and I would recommend it to people who may or may not like sci-fi. It's kind of somewhere in between on that same boat with me. John Scalzi, Fuzzy Nation, 4 stars. Excellent.
Excellent. Did you just say excellent because she said excellent? No.